So, you'd like to make marshmallows, eh? Well, really, who doesn't? And it's not that complicated, but it does require some high precision in our cooking techniques, which is why we're going to deal with it in a Footnotes episode here. And to reach that precision, we need some specialized equipment. So to make marshmallows, we need a stand mixer. Well, you could use a hand mixer, but you're going to stand for a long time with a sore arm, so use one of these beauties. A candy thermometer for accurate temperature reading. Some sort of sifting device for some powdery materials, and a kitchen scale. And if you do any of my regular cooking, you probably have one of these anyways. So if you've got these ready to go, you can unlock the ooey gooey goodness of homemade marshmallows. Watch to see how it happens.
Today's episode is brought to you by
The flip-flop, also known as the thong sandal or the toe sandal. These are probably the most economical piece of summer footwear you can find. I don't recommend them, at least not this particular one. This cheap blown EVA foam with no sole on it and the plastic top is not comfy or supportive. If you really must wear a flip-flop, choose something like this. With a leather upper, it's going to be more comfortable, less risk of chafing, and the solid rubber outsole is going to provide some durability and long-lasting behavior for it, as well as the nice EVA cushion here provides a little bit of support and protection against all of that shock that you put through your feet. So, if you're gonna do a flip-flop, don't go with this one, go with this one. When you boil it down, really, all marshmallow is candy that's had air whipped into it and then stabilized using gelatin. That's it. So, in order to make a candy, we need sugar. In the case of marshmallows, in order to make these the most stable and most successful, we're going to use two main types of sugar. We're going to use glucose, which is a super thick, crazy stuff that moves super slow and is super sticky, so be careful working with it. And we also need sucrose, or just regular table sugar. Now we're actually, for flavoring today, we're going to split that sugar into two different parts because I want to make honey marshmallows. For my honey marshmallows, I need honey. So I'm going to do almost a 1-to-1 between my glucose and my sugar. And then my sugar I'm going to split in half. So it's going to be half regular sugar and half of my honey to it. And then I'm going to add some gelatin into that to stabilize it with a pinch of salt. You can also use vanilla for flavoring, but because I don't want that to fight with the honey today, I'm actually going to leave that out. Take a medium-sized saucepan and place it on your scale. Then turn it on and tare it out so you're at 0. We want to set this for grams. We're going to measure these all in grams today. And first I'm going to add 310 grams of my glucose to my pan. If you don't have glucose, then you can add light or white corn syrup instead. Then I'm going to add to that 170 grams of regular granulated sugar, and finally 170 grams of honey. I want this to come and cook over the stove to a very certain temperature. In order to do that safely, I want to add some water to first dissolve it all in. So I'm going to take half a cup of water and add that to my pan as well. Add your candy thermometer, carefully clipping it over the edge of your saucepan, and then place that over medium heat until we reach 238 degrees Fahrenheit on the scale. That's the softball stage. Ooh, I forgot. A pinch of salt. Add that to my sugar mix too. It'll just brighten up the flavors as well. While your sugar solution is heating up, you want to take and bloom your gelatin. That means taking gelatin powder and adding it to cold water. Yes, you heard me right. Cold water. If it's warm, it won't bloom properly. Why do we bloom gelatin? Well, that way it will actually dissolve properly when we add it to our sugar solution. So I'm going to put half a cup of water in a small bowl that is cold, cold, and I'm going to zero out my scale. Then, again, set to grams, I want to sprinkle on 21 grams of gelatin powder. Now, that is equivalent to 3 packages of gelatin if you buy it in those little packages. But don't buy it in the little packages. It's way too expensive that way. Go to your local bulk store or use the interweb thingy and find it in larger quantities. It will be much cheaper. And if you're going to do a bunch of marshmallows, and why aren't you making a bunch of marshmallows? Then you'll need to have a bunch of this stuff. Buying it in packages is just not an efficient way. You'll spend too much money on your marshmallows. So sprinkling along, you can see it absorbing as it goes, and I'm going to get myself up to 21 grams, kind of evenly dispersing over the whole thing. It'll probably take it a moment to actually soak in once I've got it there. I might even give it a little shake just to get the water going around. Set that aside and allow it to bloom while your mixture actually comes up to temperature. Because of the impurities of honey, you're going to get some extra bubbles going on. So just watch that carefully. You don't really want this thing to bubble over, which is why I said a medium-sized pot for it. So watch your edges. If you have to, kind of remove your heat. As it gets up in temperature and the water is released, it will actually bubble down like it is right now. I'm looking to get up here, so I'm going to watch this thermometer really closely to see when I get to that 138 mark. In the meantime, I'm going to get my stand mixer ready here, and I'm going to add to it my bloomed gelatin mixture right in the base of it. It should kind of go in a big glump there for you. That's a good sign that the gelatin has actually bloomed and absorbed that water. I'm going to set that up ready to go so that as soon as this hits 238 degrees, I'm going to pull it off and pour it right in. While that thing is whisking away, you don't get to sit back on your haunches. No. We have stuff to prepare. So we need to make sure that we grease an 8x8 pan fully with unsalted butter. That's all around the sides and the bottom. And grease the head of a silicone spatula, please. Then we need to take and add 1/4 cup of cornstarch to a small bowl. Doesn't have to be exact. And we also need 1/4 cup of icing sugar. Take and whisk those together so that they're fairly evenly combined. See, marshmallows are crazy sticky stuff, and this powder is how we're going to prevent those marshmallows from sticking to one another and to your hands when you're working with them. Once you've got that fairly well combined, we're going to take and we're going to add some of that to our sieve here. And I'm going to use that to dust my pan. Don't be shy. Lots of dusting here. And then make sure you also try to get it on the edges when you do that as well. Here, I'm going to have to set this down in order to get that done. It's a messy job. It should look something like this. Despite my best efforts, my marshmallows still will probably stick some. Now don't get rid of that mixture that you have there. because we're going to need that later when we cut up the marshmallows. Now, this is what your marshmallow should look like when it's done. Everything from this point on needs to be done without hesitation, because already your marshmallow is going to want to set up a little bit on you, and the longer you wait, the more gooey and more difficult it gets. So, step one, notice how I've still got a lot of my marshmallow here stuck in my whisk. So, I like to take just a plain old knife, butter knife, and push that down. It's going to stick to my butter knife, doesn't matter. I want to get that as much as I can off. I know I'm not going to get it all off, so I'm just going to push through those tines and squish it out into my bowl. Once I've got most of that marshmallow through the whisk there, I'm going to kind of cut it off with my knife, give it a scrape, and then set that part aside. This is for later. Now, with my spatula that is greased, all in kind of one motion, I'm going to scrape out my bowl as best I can right down to the bottom and kind of push this towards the edge. Again, some of it's going to stick, you got to not worry about that, and drop it right into my 8x8 pan. If you've done this right and you've got good air content into those marshmallows, it's probably going to almost fill your pan here for you. Still taking that spatula, I'm going to push it out into the edges of the pan. Now remember, these are homemade, so they don't need to look perfect, but I do kind of want to fill out that whole square and somewhat smooth across the top there. I flip my spatula over to try to reduce some of that sticking that happens with it. Now, you're excited to eat these? Not yet. You have to let these sit for a minimum of 4 hours, up to overnight, before we can cut into them and dig into them. Now this stuff, fair game. My girls fight over it. You can eat it now. It's not quite as good as the finished marshmallow, but it's still pretty fantastic. Think Fluff. Last step before I walk away for the next 4 hours and try to resist touching it is I'm going to add some more of my dusting powder, that's that cornstarch, and the icing sugar across the top. Again, don't be afraid to be liberal with this. You can put lots on, whatever is left that's extra will come off later. See you in 4 hours. All right, I need to apologize. Earlier in my list of special equipment, I forgot something. A pizza wheel. Now make sure that your pizza wheel is one that has a wide diameter on it. You can get more narrow ones. You're going to need it to be this thickness so that it will cut through the marshmallow without getting stuck. So, now that our marshmallow is set, we're going to take in just a butter knife and make sure that it is loose all around the edges. It probably is going to stick just a tiny bit. And so taking a knife out there, around there, will ensure that it'll come out. Then I'm going to take and I'm going to put my cutting board actually on top of my marshmallow. Why not just dump it out? Well, then I'd have a cloud of my icing sugar and my cornstarch all over. It should, fingers crossed, just come out. Now again, it's sticking, oh, there we go, a little bit to the bottom. I gave it a little shake and it came out of my pan. My goal here is to make cubes, about 3 centimeters cubed, I think is about the size of a regular large marshmallow. So I'm going to take my wheel and first, I almost forgot, I'm going to dust it in some of this powdered mixture to help reduce the sticking. And then start by cutting in long strips. At least this is the way that I do it. Now you want to think when you do this, each strip that you cut now has this open side and it's sticky like crazy on there. So I want to take and I want to add some icing sugar and cornstarch to that edge. And I just kind of rub it in, turn it over, and just check to make sure that whole piece is no longer sticking. And I'm going to set it aside and keep on going until I've got all my strips cut. Now I'm going to take my strips, turn them the other way, and repeat. Only this time, before I go, again, I'm going to add a little bit more to my, my pizza wheel here so that it will stick less. And then once I'm done with these, as I cut them, I'm actually going to take and dip each one individually to make sure that it's completely coated and not sticking. So take your piece, you probably have a fair bit now on your board, kind of rub it around, and then I set it aside. Same thing, my new cut edges, make sure that they're all covered, set aside. Repeat that process until you've cut all your marshmallows. Don't worry if they don't all look perfect. That's part of the beauty. It is a homemade marshmallow after all. Store these in an airtight container and they'll stay fresh for at least a week, if they last that long. So, what do I do with homemade marshmallows? Well, check the video in the link below to find out.